just to frame up the intent of what I'm trying to do with these conversations is trying to build a library of content for our community, primarily internal or mostly internal. So, if you're a new franchise owner, resources where you can go listen to other franchise owners that have been through it. And so guidance and hearing people's stories and so on. And then, but also, I say mostly internal, but I also would love to make them available to prospective franchisees to watch before becoming involved, just to try to ensure alignment and make sure everybody understands what they're getting themselves into, and setting expectations properly. So that's the audience. I don't know how much they'll get used internally by existing franchisees or, frankly, prospective franchisees. So, but that's what I'm trying to do with this.
Got it.
Yeah. And so it's a lot of it really. I hope is like the sort of nuts and bolts of what it's like, what you've been through, the stories. I think rendering advice is great. I think that's great. So that's, very, very focused on sort of the ethos and mentality of what it's like to be in the business and as a new business owner.
Sounds good.
Cool. So let's start with the standard, which is, your story, and like maybe kind of gear it in the direction of parts of your history that you believe led you to getting involved in this, and what gave you the confidence and courage and to actually do it.
Well, these earbuds are terrible. I grew up really poor. So did my husband, Corey. And by that, I mean, I spent half of my time with my dad in a unheated barn, sleeping on plywood and in a sleeping bag, concrete floors below us. And I have skipped meals with both my parents to make sure that they had enough money to pay bills. So did Corey. At one point, both of us became suicidal, and something sparked in us this idea that we could either die or change the world and make it better for the people who are around us. I chose to stay alive because of my family and the hardship that I know that I would have put them through. And I just wanted to fight for them, and I wanted to make their lives better. And I wanted to help the people facing similar struggles have a better life. And I spent some time in Botswana, Africa. That's where I thought I would be of use to people, teaching English as a second language to 2, 3, 4, and 5-year-olds who were affected by AIDS, whether orphaned or could be orphaned soon. And I learned a lot there, and I realized that with so much less than what we have in America, they were so much more full of joy. And I wanted to bring that back to the people that were around me that I could influence. And I started volunteering. Well, I had started volunteering before that in Kalamazoo, and that's where I met Corey. We took our first date to a Big Beat Coffee in Kalamazoo, on Goal Road. I think it's Kyle Kinney's store. And that's where we went for almost every date after that. But he and I had such similar backgrounds and such similar goals and drives that everything really clicked for us. And he was working for a corporate company. He had sold a company to a corporate company in Kalamazoo. They hired him to be the vice president of their electronic scrap division. And we got married. I was working for a nonprofit, and his life at work was terrible. They dictated everything we wore, the cars we drove, the house we lived in. Um, when I got my son, Judah, if we wanted to bring him with us to a dinner, a business dinner, he had to be in a button-down shirt at 6 months old. That was the kind of like just every detail mattered to them, about how you look. Didn't care about how people acted. If you yelled, you were the right person for the job. And of course, Corey is not a yeller. He is down to earth and essentially a teddy bear at heart. He just wants to love people. So he approached work in such a different way from everyone that he worked with. But they made our lives hell. And uh, COVID hit, and it put a stop to his traveling, which was amazing because he had been working 3 months out of the year just traveling. I'd get a phone call at 5:30 while I'm making dinner. Hey, I have to go to Tampa. And I'm like, right now at 5:30? And I had two kids under two. And so when COVID hit, he was home all the time, and he finally got to be a dad and spend time as a family. And we decided that this was it. We're going to do something else. And we started looking at franchise opportunities. My mom and I had always wanted to run a coffee shop together. And so we went to the discovery night in Lansing and met you all and heard your purpose. And that was something that I could get behind, something he could get behind. It was the real clicker for us. And he said, well, do you want to do it? And I said, if my mom says yes, we're in. But I wasn't going to do it without her. And it took a little bit of convincing with her husband. That was probably the hardest part because we knew we'd be moving. Kalamazoo was closed at the time, and her husband's kids were all in Kalamazoo with his grandkids. So that was a little bit difficult, but he said yes, and now we're here.
That's amazing. And where's here for
Midland.
Midland? Yeah. Um, and so is your mom is still active in the business with you
Yes, she
today?
manages our second location.
Okay.
Yeah. And then we call her our compliance manager. She makes sure that everything in both stores are in compliance with the health code and Big B.
And Corey's involved in the business, or he is?
Only when I ask him.
But so did he moved? He obviously moved too. And so did he? What did he do? Did he did he take a job somewhere? Or
Well, that's a funny story. We were going to split our time and both manage Big B and be half stay-at-home parents, half business owners. And um, he had a hobby business because he can't have any hobbies unless they make money. That's his deal. And by the time we actually moved up here, his hobby business had become big enough that he was working 40 hours a week on it. And I was like, I thought you were gonna help me with this, man. What's happening? And he's like, I'm rolling. This is going so well. I can't let it go. And he now owns his company is called Keizu Bullion. It's a precious metals company. He has his own mint as well as the rights to distribute precious metals from a bunch of different worldwide mints. And he has 7 employees and a brick and mortar. And he doesn't do much with Big B unless I say, listen, I need something or I need advice. Other than that, he just lets me do my thing.
um, that's awesome. That so why why was business your choice in terms of how to impact people?
He is a serial entrepreneur. Um, and in order for us to live the lifestyle we wanted, where I could be home a lot, we knew that we needed income beyond what a normal 9 to 5 would give us without compromising on him working for another corporation. The funny thing is actually after Discovery Night, both of us had considered applying for Big B Corporate. Um, and I don't really know what ended that, but it might have been when we found out that the store here was up for sale. And that was like, okay, we'll just go that route. But both of us had thought, well, if that's their corporate purpose, maybe we could live working with Big B corporately, but that didn't end up happening. But for me, I came from the nonprofit world and I understood business. I had helped Corey run a few other just like side companies. We owned a fireworks company one time. That was really fun, except for when he set our trailer on fire. Um, we used to throw a 4th of July party every year. We had 11 acres, and then our next door neighbor was a retired chief firefighter, and he had 11 acres. So we kind of went in the middle of our fields, and we have all the professional equipment. We still do, and we would let off a good show. But the wind changed, and everything blew up at the same time. Fire started, but we got it out before the fire department came, so it was a good time. So yeah, that's a side note. We are obsessed with fireworks. Anyway, we wanted to collide our worlds. He was a volunteer at the organization that I worked for, and we wanted to make sure that whatever business we were running was positively affecting every stakeholder that there was within our business. And his company right now is doing that. And obviously, with Big B, we're doing that. And it just really worked out well for us where we could really collide the care of the nonprofit with the business side of Big B.
So go back to the start. Give me the three things that were most difficult.
Oh gosh. Number one would probably be inheriting a staff that doesn't know the purpose of Big B. Like I said, we purchased a store and it came with 12 staff members. And the store was cash flow positive, which was great. We loved that aspect of it. Uh, but eventually, we had to flip the culture. And when I moved up here with my family, we used our house as collateral. And the way that the banks were working during COVID time was just awful. So we ended up living in a hotel with 202 for about 3 or 4 weeks in a 1 bedroom hotel. And we were meant to close on our purchase the week that we got up here, but the previous owners were in Florida and they were supposed to fly up here to close. We had a meeting with their lawyer and everything, and he was going to introduce us to the staff. Well, we got up here, um, we spent a few days, checking out the town, and texted him and said, "Hey, are we still on for a meeting today with the staff?" And he goes, "No, I'm in Florida." And we're like, "Well, we're supposed to close at 5 p.m. today. Like, what are we supposed to do? It's supposed to be done at 5 o'clock." And he's like, "Well, I'm just going to do it virtually." We're like, that's not how any of this works. You can't just decide day of that we're going to do this virtually. So it set us back a whole month. And in that time, they wouldn't hire. And as soon as they announced that there were new owners, there were 3 or 4 people that quit. And so I walked in and met them that day. I said, "I'm going to be the new owner here. I want to get to know you all, get to know what roles you have, what strengths you have, whatever." And they were like, "Well, this is what we got. And our biggest issue is that there's no hiring happening and we're short staffed." So I started working 40 hours a week in the store on the line 3 weeks before I even owned the store. That was
Wow.
probably the hardest thing that I had to do. But I was like, I'm not going to let a boat sink before I get to own it and drive
Yeah.
it. Like, that's what we got. So
Well, so what delayed it a month? I mean, how, so you had a date set. Why did it take a
we had
month?
a date set, but because they wanted to do it virtually from Florida, if they had flown up here, it would have been fine. But because they wanted to do it virtually, we had to reset the clock on the scheduling system, and they said the only virtual appointment we have is a month out.
Wow. That's,
Wow.
so you just started working in there. I mean,
I
did
did.
they
I was
know? Did they know you were working in there? The owners? They had to have. Yeah.
Yeah, they had to
Yeah.
have.
Yeah.
I was clocking in as one of their employees at $0 rate, and they knew, and I was there all the time. Anytime an emergency popped up, they weren't calling them anymore, they were calling me, and I was like, "This is just awesome." So
I mean,
that
that's
was
crazy
number
though.
1.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I honestly don't know what 2 and 3 would be, hardest things.
Anything surprising? Did anything surprise you about the business?
I don't know. I really feel like, things were pretty straightforward. I guess the second thing would be, um, the training that we went through for the 6 weeks at another store was not enough. I was told that I was gonna have an owner there with me, teaching me, um, and I showed up and was there the whole 6 weeks, worked with the manager, and, we get the list from Newt that says, "This is all the things that you need to learn before you come back for your test." And the manager was like, "I don't know how to do a lot of this stuff, so I can't help you, and our owner's not gonna be in the store, so she's not gonna help you. You're just gonna have to tell him that you didn't learn this stuff." And it was like 5 or 6 things that were up there in the, like, manager ownership type roles that I was like, that I'm clueless on this stuff. And so I went into my test and I was like, "Hey, this is what I know, this is what I don't know." And then getting to my store, they didn't know that stuff either, so I had to
Right.
figure it all out on my
What was
own.
our response to that though?
Um, one of the things was the ice machine, and, the trainers opened the door and they were like, "Yeah, you're gonna do it like this." Took 2 minutes to explain it to me. The other thing was the brewers, and they were like, "Yeah, just Google it or call Paramount to do it." Cool. So, thankfully, I'm really handy and, I know how to read a manual, so I figured all that out myself. But yeah, there was a lot that I was like, "Hey, we're winging it," but
Yeah.
I'm pretty good
Yeah.
at winging it, so it was all right.
Um, so thinking of that first store, that first moment, uh, what were some of the things that you loved about it?
I loved I actually, even though it was so hard, I loved inheriting a staff, not getting to choose who you've got really, and just going in and seeing, what are their strengths, where do they need help, um, and really being a positive influence. Some of my favorite memories are with that staff that I didn't choose, and now they've all moved on. It's been 3 years. The last one I held on to ended up being our operations manager, for over a year, and then life happened and she moved to Lansing. Um, but I I understood so much more from them what it's like to move from owners who are careless to owners that care, and I could watch the transition happening. Some of them won't take it. Some of them are like, "Ah, this is fake. I'm not gonna keep going on this route," and they leave, and that's fine. But as time went on, I was able to build relationships with people that I never chose, who chose to give me a chance, and we had really great relationships, and some of them have come back and, thanked us, me and my mom, for, the support that we gave them and given us updates on where they're at in life. One of them came back to tell me that we inspired her, and she went to a coffee shop that had, an in-house roaster, and she was learning more about coffee and whatnot. Um, it's just been really cool to watch people transition from being scared and coming to work to do their jobs to coming to work because they love it, not not because they're forced to, not because it's paying their bills, but because they actually want to be here and be a part of something. That was one of
How
my
do you
favorite.
how did you do that? Like you're making that sound like it was, it just happened. It didn't just happen. Like, how did you create that?
I worked 80 hours a week for 18 months. Not 18 months, no. I worked 80 hours a week for 12 months, 60 hours a week the 3 months before and 3 months after. So it was a build up of me being there constantly and then a slowdown of like me stepping away. Um, but though we have things that are just nature to my mother and I, which is always assume good intentions, um, never be a silent endorser. And so, when you see something going wrong, we're not just going to be like, she could be doing that better. No, we're going to step in and be like, hey, there's a better way to come about this. So we were really intentional in everything that we did in our relationships with our staff, um, in the way that we trained, in the way that we showed that we cared about everything. I mean, when we came in, if you looked at the backboard on the line, the whole thing was plastered in syrup because they had never wiped it down. So I went up there pouring hot water from the brewers on that and scrubbing and scrubbing and scrubbing. And I'm the first one who's going to approach something gross and ugly. And then I'm going to expect you to take care of it as time goes on. So that's sort of, my mom has always been a servant leader to me, just always showing me the way, caring for me, going above and beyond for her employees. So that's how we started this trend, was just doing anything that we could to support our staff and knowing that I'm never going to ask them to do something that I wouldn't be willing to do. So if I'm going to ask you to scrub the toilets, you will know that I have already done it, and anything that goes on with that. And then there was never any meeting structure. So we started meetings with our shift leaders in store. It was chaotic because we had the lobby open still. So everyone would be like, oh, the Big B Colt is happening, because we're all in there reciting perk. And there's 6 of us yelling perk in the middle of the lobby because they had never learned perk. It was never expected of them. So we just kind of drilled this new culture into their heads and into their hearts. And then we started meeting with our all staff and just getting on a cycle and in a rhythm where we have regular communication. And how I want to grow, I know how you want to grow, and we're just going to keep working on this until we accomplish our dreams.
Hmm. What do you think is the most powerful uh, way to? I hear the work ethic and the um, willingness to do anything, right? You would never ask me to do something you wouldn't do. But in terms of like emotional engagement with a staff member, what's the most important component to creating the relationship?
Being able to be vulnerable, and honest. And there's a piece there where you can be honest and unloving, or you can be honest and loving. And so just walking that line where something that you have to say is gonna hurt, and just know that they're gonna take it to heart and it's gonna hurt, and you just have to deal with it. Um, but you can be authentically loving in the same way, where you're like, hey, I know this is gonna suck to hear, but you have to be better at this. And I'm going to help you get there. That's the other part, right? It's like, I'm not just telling you you suck. I'm telling you you suck, and I'm going to help you, and we're going to walk through this together, because that's the only route where I can see you succeeding. And they also have to know that you really do genuinely care, and that you're not just doing this because it's maintenance on one of your machines. Like, they are not a machine running in your store. They are a human being who's going to go off and do other things eventually. Maybe a few of your staff are going to be lifers with you, but likely most of them are going to go on and accomplish their dreams. So actually caring about what they want to be when they grow up, whether they're 16 or 50, I think is really important, that you show them, hey, I'm going to help you get to where you need to be to accomplish your dreams. So we're going to have hard conversations. We're going to be vulnerable, and also letting them see that you really do care. I took calls at midnight from girls whose number one thing was, I want to marry my boyfriend. I'm like, well, this is so outside of like what my dreams are, but I'll stick with you and whatever this means for you. Um, but yeah, they would call me at midnight and be crying and tell me things like, I got in an argument with my boyfriend. We were playing video games and yada. And I'm like, this is so outside of me, but okay, I'm listening. And, maybe you need to give it some time. Just try to give them relationship advice that isn't like intrusive and isn't like pushing them one way or another, but to just give them advice that allows them to step back and see the whole picture for what it is. And that's what we did. I mean, for everybody and everyone's dreams, just letting them see that we support them.
So I agree 100% with the concept that one of the more powerful ways to build trust with someone that works with you is to be vulnerable as the leader. I heard that in what you were saying. Do you have an example of that?
I don't know that I have a specific example off the top of my head, but I have regularly asked, if not weekly, at least monthly, my staff to call me out on my crap and tell me where I'm going wrong. And I guess one of my favorite things is I have a few staff members, one in particular, who, if I make a decision and release it to our staff, and they haven't heard about it yet, will come up to me and say, how does this fit with our purpose? Is this helping us support our staff? And like, we'll go through this list of questions to really question me and make sure that I made a decision that is in line with what I say I'm going to do. So that would be one example of where
Yeah.
I have to be like, oh, maybe I think so. I think I made the right decision. Um, but they're constantly calling me out. If I say I'm going to do something and I don't, like if I'm late on a project that I say, like, this is what I'm going to have this information to you, they'll call me out right away and to the dot. Like if I say it's going to be done at 10 a.m. and it's 10:02 when I turn it in, they're like, listen, Norma, you were late. You messed up. This is crap. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. You're right. So,
Well, okay, so you decided to open a second store.
yes.
So take me through that consideration, that thinking. Um, how did it go? What would you do differently?
Well, we were looking at doing a second location, not in Midland. We didn't feel like Midland was ready yet for a second location. But our AR, Alex, came to us and said, I have property near Costco and I will develop a Big B unless you sign a franchise agreement for a second location in Midland, in which case I won't. So we were like, well, in order to not split our cup count with someone else, we'll split our cup count with ourselves. Um, so we signed in January of 2021, and we had taken over our first store in October of 2020. So it had only been a few months and we signed our second agreement. I know exactly where I wanted it, and I told Corey, and he knew that that's where I wanted it. So he made a few phone calls, and lucky for us, the T-Mobile that was in our second location was going month to month, and they hadn't told their landlord that they had signed a lease inside the mall. And so we let them know, hey, we would like to be in there. We'll sign a 10-year lease. And just so you know, T-Mobile is moving into the mall. And they're like, wow, okay.
How did you
And
learn that? How did you learn that?
it was obvious. You could see the work being done in the mall for T-Mobile. And then we have a local page called Ask Midland, and uh, it's got all the tidbits of information you could ever want. about what's going on in Midland every single day. And so it was confirmed in Ask Midland. And so we sent that information their way, and they gave T-Mobile, I think, 2 or 3 months before they said, we need you to be out. We're signing a lease. Um, Doing the second store was really, really tough. I had never opened a new store, so I'd never been through the build out phase. There was a lot of miscommunication between me, Alex, and home office staff. Um, they had told me they had set me up a new email for my new store. I had never opened it because I was using the other store email, and they set me up a personal email. So I was using my personal and the other store's email. Well, apparently, a lot of information had been sent to the other store, and no one ever tried to reach out to me any other way. And there were some issues there, um, but
I imagine.
we got those resolved fairly quickly. Um, the build out phase was probably one of the toughest things that I went through with the second store, and um, getting our design approved was difficult. I wasn't getting feedback really from anyone, and I was reaching out for feedback. And I know Corey gave you a phone call, and you got us situated, which was great. I still have no idea what Corey said to you. I just know
He was great.
I
He
was
was great.
complaining to Corey, and Corey was like, "I'm calling Mike."
Yeah.
Okay. Uh, um, so we're grateful for you for situating us. And then Denise Urbane, who was working on our store, was just phenomenal, and she helped me in every way. So I highly recommend reaching out to Denise about literally anything. She's a wonderful, sweet woman. Um, but we were hoping to open in the fall, September of 2021. And of course, COVID had so many pushbacks. We had pushbacks on our design because we didn't want the typical layout. I wanted an office. They wanted me to have shelving and no door. And I fought back and I said, I really want to be able to have private, meaningful conversations with people. Um, and I just can't do that in my lobby anymore. I'm tired of bringing people out and having them crying. Whether it was good crying or bad crying, it's embarrassing for my baristas to cry in front of the staff and the customers that they serve. And it's embarrassing for me because it always is going to look like from the outside that I'm antagonizing them or giving them a write up, even though it may just be like, hey, I noticed that you're hurting. Like, how are you doing? And then they break down. It never looks the way it should. So finally got everything approved, but everything got us pushed back to opening in January. And that was a struggle because we had paid our rent from April of 2021 to January without having any income on the store. So everything I had made in 2020 and 2021 at 664, I was putting into the store to pay the bills. And then the best part of all of that was we had a COVID loan, and they wanted to close it out so that we could get the no interest for whatever it was, 3 months or 6 months. And they didn't notify us. And I had $60,000 in bills that had not been accounted for in our loan. And they were like, well, sucks for you. We already closed it out. And I didn't find that out until I sent them the receipts. And I said, can you please add these approved receipts to our loan package? And they said, no, it's closed. Cool. So then we're scrambling, trying to figure out what are we going to do to pay for this $60,000 that we've already sent out checks for and everything. So we got a second loan for 40,000 and had to come up with 20K cash, which was really fun when we're not even open. And then since we're scrambling so much, we just said the day that we can open, we're going to open. We know it's on a Tuesday. We got told on Monday that we could open on Tuesday. So we opened on Tuesday. We had 250 cups, and we might have cried a little bit because that was not what we anticipated. Um, for a grand opening, that's probably one of the saddest numbers I've ever heard. And so coming from having 664 was at 440 cups a day on average the year before. And of course, coming from fall, we had 600, 700 cup days, and we're like, yeah, we're gonna have an awesome opening day. And we did 250 cups. So that was really terrible. We had 40 staff between the two stores, knowing that it's gonna simmer down and people are gonna decide whether they stay or go. So we overhired. Of course, we had to get 40 people trained. We had about 18 of them fully trained when we opened the store. So we completely split our staff and expected our culture to figure itself out. But I was working 80 hours a week, um, all through that time, trying to make sure everybody's okay, that the culture's okay with all these new people. Um, and we made a lot of hiring mistakes just based on um, I allowed some people to take on interviews before they were totally ready, and they hired a few people that I would never have hired. um, but overall, it worked out okay for us. And we didn't make any money 2021 or 2022. I think we made $10,000 or something. So it wasn't enough to take a disbursement. So one of the hardest parts that we've had is our entire lives for the last year and a half, 2 years have been on credit cards. Um, and this year we were able to start paying ourselves back on some of the money that we've put into the stores, which we've just been grinding on. I've joked a few times that in the last, well, not this last, but in 2022, if I had been my own barista, I would have made more money than I did as the owner of the store. But my employees knew, and I think that being open about your financials is really beneficial because I mean, if you care about them, they're going to care about you. And they were all so supportive, and they really worked hard to make sure that there weren't extra costs to anything, and they respected anything that we needed to do based on our financials. Um, and I promised them, you know, if we win, you win. We're not holding back. Um, and and that's what we got. So now we're here.
And so the second store was negative cash flowing and
It was
eating the cash flow that the first store was generating.
absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah, that was tough. And then of course, because we're about 5 miles apart, um, it took some of the cup count from the other store. And we were down, I think it was 65 cups a day the whole year, which is like $150,000 in revenue, which sucks. But you know, I worked those 80 hours a week, and that wasn't just being in the store on the line. That was also, you know, getting our name out there, marketing, doing drink drops, whatever we could to increase our cup count. And now both stores are at 340 to 350. So we've we've definitely increased our cups. So in total, we went from 440 a year to 700 a year, but split between two stores.
Um, because we are going to be making this public to perspectives, I can't ask you the details of that. Meaning, you know, but let's thank you for sharing all that. That is
Yeah.
the kind of stuff that I want to make available to people. Is the you know, the details part, the detail part of the story. You know, and so I appreciate you diving deep on that. If you so two more questions. If you had to give advice to yourself when you were 18 years old today, what would you say to yourself?
I would say always do the next right thing and invest in people, and also invest in yourself. I think one of the hardest things that I've been through in life was postpartum depression and anxiety. I had it with both my kids. My first two are only 15 months apart. So I didn't even realize I had postpartum depression and anxiety until I was diagnosed with it after the birth of my second. So I went through her whole pregnancy with depression and anxiety, undiagnosed. And I just thought that I was losing my mind and everything around me sucked. And, um, I struggled a lot with intrusive thoughts um, and feeling worthless. But I know that I can always commit myself to a purpose. And I felt purposeless because I was at home with 2 kids who can't talk, who all they do is eat, poop, and sleep. And it's like you just feel so meaningless after being stuck there in that state for that long. I was out in the country, which we wanted, but I was 30 minutes from my mom, who was working 60 hours a week, and her husband was working 100 hours a week because he was working in a flower greenhouse. Um, so I didn't really have any support, and Corey's parents were 3.5 hours away, and Corey was working 70 hours a week, and 3 months out of the year was gone. So I was alone on an island, and I wish that I could have told myself back then, like, to get out and make your life meaningful, and also that bonding with your kids is meaningful because I just could not see the value in that whatsoever in my state. Um, but it's interesting because when I moved here to Midland and I started working in our first store, I felt alive again for the first time in a long time, and my involvement with people and, um, seeing them realize things in themselves that they couldn't before and seeing them chase their dreams was something that made me feel alive again, and, without that, I don't think I would have been able to stop my medication, but 6 months into being here and being a part of Big D, I was able to stop my, depression and anxiety medication, and wow, does that change perspective on life? Because on that, I don't know if you've ever taken one, but you feel numb to everything. And you don't just not feel sadness and anger, you just feel nothing. So there was no feeling of like joy or anything. And coming off of that is terrifying because then if you're happy for a second, you just start bawling because your body doesn't know how to deal with emotions. So I guess when we talk about being vulnerable with my staff, like if I get excited, I'm gonna freaking cry. And then they're like, whoa, what the heck? So that probably did help that I had no choice but to be vulnerable with them because my body was just gonna force me. And yeah, it changed my life because it gave me back that feeling of purpose that I always longed for and wanted. But having postpartum depression and anxiety it was almost like I was a kid again and in the depths of despair and thought about suicide and um, having having something outside of the house that I had a purpose in was gratifying and just changed my world.
Thank you for sharing that. You started with you would invest in others, but also invest in yourself.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that piece? Invest in yourself.
You only get the one life that you live, and tomorrow is never guaranteed to you. And I've been close to death a lot of times, and I've had family close to death a lot of times. And um, I just think that you should have a life that is meaningful to you and that you enjoy. And that requires some investment in yourself. And also, as business advice, the number one person that you can invest in it is yourself. Um, you are the only person who's never going to turn away from what you're doing. Anybody else could turn away in an instant. Um, but you're the one who keeps everything going. And honestly, you deserve it. So when I talk about investing in myself, I read tons of books um, because I always have to be learning. Um, I think I read probably 24 full length books a year. just to keep myself going, and audiobooks and podcasts. I take time for myself. Um, I give myself the breaks that I deserve. Corey will buy me a gift card to Delta and Marriott and allow me to choose my solo vacations, which I was expecting this year, but now I'm pregnant and I can't, which sucks. But I don't think it'd be any more fun to be throwing up in a hotel room in some other state than it would be to be throwing up at home.
It might be more comfortable to do it at home. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Especially when I have a 5 and a 4-year-old who are like, "Are you okay, mom? Can I get you anything?" Which is wonderful. I wouldn't have that at a hotel. So I'll be waiting another 2 years for my next solo adventure. But I mean, do the things that you're passionate about and invest in the things that you care about.
Um, one. So I want to have you give advice to somebody who's new in the business, or considering business. What would you say? Like if you could take 5 minutes to talk to every new prospective franchisee or newly signed franchisee.
I would say learn as much as you can from the people who know what they know. Like, read Mike's book, Grow, and then read Grind. Uh, so you
You
know
do them
what
in
you're
that order.
I do, because that way you know what you're aiming for before you figure out what you're gonna go through. Like, to me, if you can see the end goal, you'll do anything for that, right? And I know that grow is not necessarily the end goal, but boy, does it paint a beautiful picture. And so to me, I'm saying read Grow and then read Grind. And then you're like, yeah, I can manage that if this is what I'm looking forward to. And then also call people. Um, I'm always saying, like, invest in people, but invest in people for yourself too. So to me, I'm closest with the people on the Life Lab team. So I would say call Bree, call Laura, call Alicia, call Denise Urbane, especially if you have any questions about the build out phase. She doesn't do it anymore, but she knows what she's doing. So
She does.
I mean, call you and call Bob. I know Corey met Bob for coffee before we even went to a discovery night, just to double check that Bob was a real kind human being and had the same goals that Corey did, because Corey knows that you as leaders really set the example. And so he needed to verify that you guys were who you say you were. And Bob was, I guess, easy to locate.
Well, I agree. I think that the thing that um, franchise owners don't leverage is the most powerful part of what we offer, which is the community. And to be involved in a franchise system, but then not engage the community, to me, it's just crazy.
I know.
And it's not just us; it's other franchise owners and building relationships with other franchise owners, so you can draw on their expertise and knowledge as well.
Yeah.
And
I think they're afraid, though. I think that's why. I think people are afraid of, holding another relationship, but also that someone might lead them astray, or that they're gonna want more out of you than what you want to be able to give. But I think that's all a false thing.
yeah, that's not my experience in the world.
No.
And I also think sometimes, though, I think new franchise owners are scared to admit they don't know stuff because they feel kind of dumb that they don't know these things, but like you're not supposed to, you
Right.
know. And I feel bad about your part of the story where like the manager wasn't there to train you, like in your 6 weeks, like that.
Yeah.
That's yeah, that's tough. But I mean, you figured it out. I guess we all do. But the thing is like uh, you're not supposed to know everything, and we got to leverage the community. Call on other franchise owners, call me, call whoever. Corey called me, and I remember I was like, yeah, I mean, I didn't lose my mind, but I was like, the story was pretty dramatic, and I engaged. Yeah, of course I do. And so um, I like that. I do. And this concept of investing in yourself, like, yeah, like what else is there? Because
Right.
if you're not investing in yourself, you can't be good to other people. You can't take care of other people, and you just run your own tank dry. And poof, it's a tough place to be. Well, I truly appreciate your vulnerability, for and sharing the full story. And that's what I'm trying to get at with these is, these are not meant to be marketing slicks, they're meant to be helpful. And so, I think your story is going to be helpful to people who are either newly involved or considering it. And so thank you as always. I appreciate you. I appreciate what you do. I appreciate your approach. Good luck with the new addition to the family.
Thank you.
Yep, that's amazing. And I wish you all the best.
Thank you.